Welcome back to another episode of Constellation Crew. I just gotta say, I'm happy to be here again. And if my crew members could please introduce themselves one more time for those who may be new to the show.
I'm Jessica. What else? What else should I share, Kyree?
Just your name and just your grade. That's pretty much it.
I'm a transfer student. So this is my first year here at Ball State. Chirp chirp. Yeah.
All right.
I'm Maya, and I am a senior here, majoring in astronomy.
Nice. Well, to anyone who's new, again, welcome and thank you so much for coming. We're glad to have you here. This is our very own Constellation Crew, hosted by Charles Brown Planetarium, where we talk about cool space facts that may be happening in our own Muncie area. So make sure to always keep an eye out, and most importantly, keep an eye up. But of course, we're in the holiday season, so of course we got to address some holiday questions. First off, how was everyone's Thanksgiving break?
It was great. I liked having, time to not do anything.
That's all I can wish for some of these days. What about you, Maya?
Yeah, it was pretty good. I got to eat real food.
It was so great. I actually brought some leftovers here after Thanksgiving, already gone. That was a great lunch.
Yep.
But yeah, and then most importantly, with all of our crew members being students here at Ball State, how are you feeling about the end of semester coming up, and more importantly, how are you feeling about finals?
I'm definitely glad this semester is ending. Finals, trying not to think about it.
See,
I should be thinking about it,
See,
but
that's
I'm
smart.
trying
That's
not
smart.
to.
See, I'd like to not think about it, but I literally have a final presentation tomorrow. So, presenting here for Constellation Crew, and then I'm going to be presenting again tomorrow for a
Yeah,
seminar. So
yeah.
that's going to be great.
Kind of a scary thought how, like, in 2 weeks, we'll be in finals week, and I'm like, this semester go? It's gone.
It's already gone. It's
Like,
crazy.
what?
What about you,
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I guess I feel okay. It is what it is. I'm just trying to get prepared as best I can, but just ready to be done.
Well, let's, focus away from all the doom and gloom. You're right. I don't want to think about finals, and I don't want to think about this presentation. But what I do want to think about is what actually happened recently. So as I mentioned before, Constellation Crew is with Charles Brown Planetarium, and we had something really fun at the top of this month, our very own Astronomy Slam. So can we all, be happy about that? Even though it's all over. But jokes aside, it was a really great time. It's essentially where we get anybody who's really interested to talk about anything that they like about space. It could be constellations, it could be planets, it could be exoplanets, it could even be black holes. And one very cool thing that happened in Astronomy Slam is that somebody that, for all of our past viewers who saw the last episode, somebody who you actually know, who is sitting right here, won Astronomy Slam. So, Maya, how do you feel?
It was great. Didn't expect it.
So what did you feel about the whole thing in general, besides just, winning and becoming the Astronomy Slam champion in 2023?
Yeah, I memean, it was fun putting it together. It was kind of stressful because I felt like I didn't have too much time with schoolwork and everything else. But I actually really enjoyed presenting. Like once I got up there and was presenting, I felt fine. So it was pretty fun overall.
I want to say everyone genuinely had very cool just presentations in general. Could you talk
Yeah.
a quick bit about what you presented yourself? I know I preluded to it 2 seconds ago.
Yeah, so I just really gave a overview of black holes, what they are, debunked some myths and common things you might hear about them. Yeah, and just went into a little detail about them. I showed the scale of them. I talked a little bit more about supermassive black holes and how they're different. Yeah.
And then of course, Jessica, I also know you were there. How'd you feel about the entire presentation?
It was great. I think everyone did a good job. It was really interesting being in like the audience perspective and getting to see everybody, do their stuff. Like normally, like at work, we're just, sitting there talking, explaining information to people, but to see like my coworkers like go up there and present something was like really cool. And kind of nervous for next year. I feel like I have a legacy to uphold with you two both being Astronomy Slam winners. I really feel the pressure is on,
See, the pressure is really on because if you think about it, our very own Nicola Teresiano, she was the winner before me. And then
Yeah,
I was the winner, and then I became the host of Constellation Crew. So if you become the host of Constellation Crew, well then now you have to win. You
I have to
you can't
win,
fall
actually.
behind.
There's no choice. Yeah. Woo.
Well, other than that, overall it was a really great event, and I wish everybody could have been there, but unfortunately we only have so much room in the planetarium. But it was a really cool event, and I'm just glad that the person who won was my very own crew, so I can have a bigger ego to inflate to myself. But jokes aside, let's really get into the meat and potatoes of the show and actually talk about constellations and space stuff. So, one big thing that's happening is another meteor shower. And we talked about this last show if you were here, and essentially meteor showers just being streaks of light that you'll see in the sky, which is just dust and particles that are just being flown out from its radiant. And our radiant is what we are looking at here, this constellation of Gemini. So before we really talk about the meteor shower itself, let's talk about Gemini, since it's right here. And if you would like to start things off, Maya, what would you like to talk about Gemini, our good friend here, the twins?
Yeah, so I kind of want to start with Casper. He's actually one of the twins. So Castor he's also known as the Alpha Geminorum, and it's located in the Gemini constellation. It's, as I said, one of the twin stars. Its twin in that constellation is Pollux. Castor is located about 51 light years from us, and although Pollux and Castor are twins, they're actually and in close proximity to each other, they aren't actually gravitationally bound to each other. However, Castor is gravitationally bound into a 6-star system. So it's made up of 3 pairs of binary stars, 6 in total. So we have Castor A, Castor B, and Castor C. And each of those have 2 stars in them. So that makes it 6 total. Now, all of those stars, they range from either hot A-type stars or the cooler M-type of red dwarf stars. And all the stars have a common center of mass. They're all gravitationally bound. The mass of this multi-star system is about 6 times the mass of our sun. So it's pretty massive.
Nice. It's honestly really cool to always note that even though we're really looking up the sky and we're looking at constellation and we see all these bright objects, that it's maybe just not, a singular star, having an actual multi-star system within this constellation, and just, it being something that isn't just, one star out in space all alone, but knowing that it's just a bunch of stars and, they all get to hang around and, go on their own adventures throughout space. But it is interesting that you mentioned that Castor's twin is Pollux, because I would actually like to talk about Pollux and just tell everybody cool, interesting facts about it. And for those who don't know, Pollux is actually a red giant star, which means that it's at the end of its quote-unquote younger life, and it's exhausted its main supply of hydrogen, what is really the main fuel for stars, and now it's fusing all of the elements inside, bringing them all together to really keep sustaining itself. And one really interesting thing about Pollux is that in constellations, everything has a designation coming from the Greek alphabet. So we have alpha, beta, gamma, delta, and these all are designated by giving it its Greek letter and then following up with the name of the constellation itself. And it's based off of their brightness. So alpha being the brightest, and then the further down you go, beta, gamma, delta, that means they are less brighter than the alpha star in the constellation. But Pollux is the beta designation, but yet it's brighter than Castor, its twin, by about like 0.5 of a magnitude. And it's just really interesting because we have this designation based off of brightness, and the brightest star is designated as the second brightest star. And so there's a lot of theories about maybe back in the past, because the designation system was made by Johann Bayer back 300 years ago. So a lot of people theorize that, maybe Pollux wasn't as bright as it used to be, or even that sometimes Bayer might have just based stars off of what actually came up first, sometimes, not often. And because he lived in Germany at the time, Castor would be rising into view before Pollux. So some theorize that maybe that's why Castor has the alpha designation instead of the beta designation. But honestly, really cool stuff about it. But Pollux is like 51 light years away. Just some quick facts about it, which is almost 200 trillion miles. I always make this joke. Seems like a pretty nice road trip if anybody wants to take it, 200 trillion miles out. Not too bad, right? You can finish that off in like a summer vacation. Anyways, and another cool thing is that it has a planet orbiting around it. It's called an exoplanet, and basically those are planets that are just outside of our own solar system, and it's a gas giant that's at least 2 times larger than Jupiter. So, our very own giant planet has been beaten by this one singular planet that's orbiting Pollux. But other than that, Jessica, do you have any interesting facts about Gemini that you want to share?
I do, and thank you so much, Kyree, for bringing up the red giant star being kind of the beginning or the end of the first part of the star's life cycle, because I'm going to talk about kind of the beginning of the end part of the star's life cycle with the Medusa Nebula. So the Medusa Nebula is a planetary nebula. And what that is when the star starts to die, it kind of sheds its outer layer of gas, and that forms into a nebula. So the Medusa Nebula specifically was from a red giant star. And it's located approximately 1,500 light years away, and it's about 4 light years in diameter. And it's located in between Gemini and Canis Minor. If you have a really nice, high-tech telescope thing and you want to go see it. And the nebula was named after the Greek mythological being named Medusa, who I'm sure we all know, who had snakes for hair, and she could turn people into stone by looking at them. It is called the Medusa Nebula because depending on which kind of angle you're looking at it, it appears to be kind of a crown of snakes almost. Yeah, like that. So kind of the bottom part of it, that would be kind of the crown of snakes, I guess. They're kind of little wispy figures. And yeah, and the stellar core of the star, so that's what remains after the gases have been expelled from it, I guess. That's what gives it the glow that gives the nebula its glow. And another fun fact, so this stage, the planetary nebula stage of a star, it can last for about 10,000 years. And Miss Medusa Nebula over here, she's estimated to be about 8,800 years old. So she's been living for a pretty long time, and she's got a little bit over 1,000 years left in her before she'll fade away. But yeah.
I really enjoyed that description of the Medusa Nebula, and I also always love Greek mythology. Medusa is one of my favorite topics to talk about. But yeah, I pretty much love the Medusa Nebula. This is not my first time seeing it, and I can't remember when the first time I've seen images of the Medusa Nebula, but it's been a while. And of course, I personally enjoy the nebula itself. I'd put it in probably I'd say my top 10. It's a nice nebula to look at with images that we have here and what you can see here with our friendly assistant Stellarium. Give it up for Stellarium one more time for giving us an image to really power up Jessica's description. But of course, we are not here to just talk about Gemini, but of course the meteor showers. And of course, even though we're looking at Gemini here, it really doesn't help much if I just show you where it is and expect you to just find it without no like real help. So here we are. Today's date with again the help of Stellarium is December 13th. And just as a friendly reminder for meteor showers, they always have their very own peak dates. And the peak dates for this one would be December 13th to the 14th. And then there's always a peak hour, but unfortunately for all of us living in Muncie, that peak hour is at 2:27 p.m. The sun's gonna be there is no way we're gonna see that meteor shower, but don't fret, that's only the peak hour where you're gonna see the most meteor showers. This is still a very strong meteor shower overall, so if you just stay up for those nights of December 13th and 14th, you're gonna see a lot of meteors. But here we are looking at the eastern side of Muncie, and the best way to find it is through our very old friend Orion, who we always talk about here in Constellation Crew, one of the most easiest and more beginner friendly constellations to really look out for, because you can easily note it by its belt, Orion's belt to be specifically. And from Orion's belt, which is lying again in the southeast, you can find that in your night sky, and then you can sort of make a nice check mark with Alhina here, which is in the foot of our Gemini constellation. And you can make this nice check mark shape, and then sort of keep following this longer checkmark line between Altenac and Alhina, and find yourself all the way at Castor, which Maya was just talking about. And the radiant, again, to remind where the meteors are going to be originating from, will be somewhat a bit over its head around in this region that you can see I'm pointing out with my cursor here. But beyond just Gemini, there's a lot of popular constellations that we really talk about here in Constellation Crew. And you know, I want to switch it up. And what best way to switch it up by talking about some constellations that really nobody talks about, and to make it even more fun and related to our very own holiday season, we're going to talk about all of the more unpopular constellations that you can see on Christmas Eve. And who would like to start us off on talking about all of these unpopular constellations in our night sky?
I will. So I want to talk about Delphinus. Delphinus, if you can't tell by the name, resembles a dolphin. Resembles, I use that term very loosely. And it is one of the smallest constellations and is only made up of 5 stars. So it was first discovered in the 2nd century by a Greek astronomer named Ptolemy of Alexandria. And the name pays tribute to 2 different kind of Greek myths that involve dolphins. The first one is about the Greek god Poseidon. So Poseidon was out looking for his wife-to-be. She ran away. And so he sent out all these aquatic animal messengers into the ocean to go find her, as one does. And the one that found her was a dolphin, and the dolphin brought her back. So he put a constellation in the sky that was a dolphin. And the other myth that could be the explanation, I guess, for the dolphin would be this Greek poet and musician whose name was Arion. And Arion was lost at sea, but a dolphin brought him back to land and saved him. And so the Greek god Apollo, the god of music and poetry, he placed the dolphin into the sky to kind of honor that dolphin as a little thank you. I think that's a very nice thank you for saving someone's life, is getting a constellation. And Delphinus has the brightest 4 stars. They kind of create a little diamond shape. So that's kind of how you can see it. Yes, right there. And it is in between Pegasus and Aquila, but it's kind of just like, I don't know, just in like a mesh of like all like, what's the swan's name? Cygnus?
Yes, that would be Cygnus the Swan.
Yeah, Cygnus, Pegasus, and Aquila. It's kind of like all like in between the 3 of those. But yeah, that's kind of how, if you're out looking for it, just try to find a little diamond between them, and then you'll see its little tail. The diamond is the head, of course, of the dolphin. And yeah.
And one really cool thing to note about the constellations is that it's actually like really in between two really popular asterisms. And that first one being the very own Summer Triangle. If you actually look right here, the Summer Triangle is right next, all the way, like really close at the west. This is 10 p.m. again on Christmas Eve. And you can see here we have Altair, Deneb, and of course Vega. So here we have the Summer Triangle, just peeking its head, about to say goodbye. And of course, it's also in between another asterism. As you mentioned, the constellation Pegasus is here, so a lot of people may know the Great Square of Pegasus. And if you just really look in between these two great asterisms, again, they're not constellations because they actually consist of stars that are within three separate constellations, except for Pegasus. The Great Square is still within the Pegasus constellation, but it's not the entirety of it, so it is an asterism. But as mentioned earlier, Delphinus is literally right in between them. So whenever you're out, especially on Christmas Eve, make sure to really take a look in the west and just look for Delphinus. But I will remind you that it is one of our fainter constellations that you will see out in the night sky, and so monthly we do have a good amount of light pollution, so it may be just a tiny bit harder to see. But hey, if you can find that great Summer Triangle and the Great Square of Pegasus, you'll be looking in the right direction. But of course, there's actually another constellation that is sort of like a next door neighbor to Delphinus, and I'll actually talk about that here. And so this constellation that we're looking at, again, in between our two asterisms, is I always goof up this word, Equalus. And there's actually like a lot to talk about with Equalus here, so much so that I will like sort of make a quick talk about it. And there's like three more popular mythologies behind it. The first one being that it's actually the child of Pegasus here, and so that's why Equalus is like right next to it. Equalus was named as the child of Pegasus, but some also say that Equalus is the little brother to the to our Pegasus here. So two different like varying views on what Equalus's relationship to Pegasus here. But it's still also nice to talk about both of them. But I personally would like to believe that it is the child of Pegasus, because that Equalus's literal name is Little Horse. So I think I find it a bit more fun for Equalus to be like the child of Pegasus, following it throughout the night sky. But there is one more mythology that people do know, and it's completely unrelated to Pegasus, so I won't be saying Pegasus for the 13th time. And people say that the reason Equalus is a constellation is because it was made a constellation due to a giant fight between Poseidon and Athena, literally just trying to prove who's better between the two. Who doesn't love good old Greek gods just fighting because they want to see who's better than the other. And essentially what happened was, during their fight, Poseidon's trident actually hit the little horse, Equalus, and then it went into the sky and became the constellation that we see now. But as I mentioned before, it is again a fainter constellation, so you will be looking in generally the right direction if you look for our good old Summer Triangle and the Great Square of Pegasus, but you may not be able to see it because, of course, our light pollution within here in Muncie, Indiana. But with that out of the way, Maya, do you have an unpopular constellation that you would really like to talk about?
Yes, I actually do. This one is called Auriga.
I totally get it.
I keep wanting to call it arugula, but it's Auriga. Okay. So Auriga is a constellation that neighbors the popular constellations Gemini and Taurus. It was one of 48 constellations listed by the second century astronomer Ptolemy. So it's actually visible in the northern hemisphere during the winter months. Now, the name Auriga means charioteer in Latin. So in mythology, it's often depicted as it holding a female goat and her kids with the reins of a chariot. So you can find this constellation by spotting the recognizable constellation Orion that we've talked quite a bit about. as they're both in the west northwestern sky shortly after the sun sets. Now, right above Orion, you'll see another popular one, which is Taurus, the Bull constellation. And then right above that, you'll see the bright star, which is called Capella, and that makes up the majority of this constellation. So, yeah, those are a few cool facts about that one. Sorry about the name. I don't know what's going on.
Nope, it's totally fine. I'm gonna forever call this constellation Arugula the Chariot. This is like its name. I'm gonna like talk to major astronomers and like get the name changed. But yeah, and it's funny that we're, you know, finding ourselves right here in the ecliptic. For those who don't know, this is an imaginary line in our night sky in which the planets follow. And well, not the planets follow, but what the planets follow in our perspective. They're not specifically following the line per se, but this is just how we see it on our own planet here on Earth. And with that said, let's talk about some of these planets that we'll see at night. The reason we're really bringing this up is because if you actually come here at the Charles Brown Planetarium after our shows, typically the last show, so around 7, we actually have our very own telescope that we use to point up at the night sky and take a look at all the planets that we can see at night, and those planets being Jupiter and Saturn. So for those who actually did look at our telescope here in the Constellation crew, what did you think about, you know, actually looking at these planets up close and in a really good telescope that I might add? So I highly recommend that you do come here.
Yeah, I got the chance to see Saturn, which was very cool. You know, when you're like, you know, you're on Earth and you're looking at the sky and you see one of the planets, it just looks like a big ball of nothing, basically, of light. There's nothing really distinguishable about it, but seeing it in the telescope and being able to see the rings and the color of it, it's like, whoa, it's like actually a real thing. I think it just kind of puts things into perspective. And yeah, I thought it was really cool. I'm not an astronomy major. You know, so I don't know what y'all do, if y'all like look at planets all the time or what, but like, so for me, it was like really cool to be able to see it and see the rings of Saturn. Yeah.
And I'm glad you mentioned that, because that's one of the best things about planetariums. You know, it brings everybody who's from the public, who comes from all sorts of lifestyles, and you know, not all of them are going to be interested in astronomy per se as like a career choice. Some of them might find astronomy fun as like a good little recreational type deal. So it's cool to really get input from people who are just not astronomy majors, besides, you know, all of the good old physics and astronomy majors who are sitting here in Cooper science. And I personally was able to take a look at Saturn, so you know, I was able to see its good old ears, which we know as its rings, but I was also able to take a look at Jupiter. It was after closing, and you know, our good old boss Dana was like, I trust you guys, you can finish this up, I'm gonna go home because I'm tired. And me and one of the coworkers here, we decided to point it up at Jupiter because it finally peeked its head over our planetarium, and we were just able to see it. And like I mentioned, the telescope itself is strong, so we're even able to see the lines on Jupiter itself. So as Jessica mentioned here, you like know and you can see it instead of just, you know, relying on good old textbook images of what Jupiter actually looks like. You can actually see it up close and up personal if you use a good telescope.
Yeah, I'm bummed I haven't been able to see it yet with the telescope. One of these days.
Well, with shows coming up literally at the end of this week, you should totally stick around and check it out. And I also invite everyone viewing at home, if you find yourself in the Muncie area, to really just come over to the planetarium, take a look at our great shows that we have coming up, and really take a look at this telescope and just see these planets up close for yourself. But with that said, does anybody in this crew have any comments or dying things that they want to say to everyone watching at home?
Can't say I do. Hope y'all learned a lot.
Yeah, again, sorry about the pronunciation of Ariga.
You do not have to apologize. Like I said, I'm keeping the name Arugula. I won't say it out loud to, you know, not look goofy.
My brain, it just can't, it doesn't see, it sees arugula.
You know, sometimes you gotta really look at a polygon and call it a rectangle sometimes. But with that said, as I mentioned before, we are Constellation Crew, a part of Charles Brown Planetarium. So please come visit us, you know, actually get to say hi and come really look at our shows. We have a long fan awaited one for the Christmas Star, a really fun program that I personally enjoy. I put it in like my top 5. Everyone, if you on like the actual team, you know that my favorite is Big Bird, but I would most definitely recommend coming over and really checking out the Christmas Star. It's a really highly awaited one. And for those who have kids and want to come earlier, we also have the Magic Treehouse Mission, and which is also another really good one. I also would recommend, and just come along and have a good time. But with that said, unfortunately, speaking of time, we don't have all the time in the world. But I would actually, you know, love to, you know, stay here for another few hours, talk more about space. But I know I can't hold up my crew forever. They'd be pretty mad at me and they'd probably stop liking me, and I don't want that. So, with that said, thank you again so much for coming and really just giving us your good old 30 minutes of your well spent time. And I really hope that you've learned something about space and about all the unpopular things that you'll see in your Christmas night sky. So, with that said, we'll see you here. Not necessarily same time, but same channel. With that said, goodbye.